Hello and welcome to our conversation. My name is Ham Jae-bong. I'm the president of the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. And today with me we have two experts, one from the United States and one from China. To my left is Dr. Bonnie Glaser from the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. And to my right is Dr. Jin Chanrong of the Renmin University of China. Welcome, both of you. So let's start with the most immediate topic at hand, which is the leadership transition currently taking place in China. Professor Jin, if I may go to you first, what do you think is the significance, the meaning of the current leadership transition taking place in China?
As an intellectual, I'm pleased to see this result. Used to be China's leadership transition decided by a strongman. And now we say farewell to that time strongman politics. Now the result is a compromise by various factions. So I think China's politics enter a new stage. It's something like LDP of Japan, you know.
Is that good?
I don't know, but compared to the strongman politics, I think that's progress. People fighting each other, the final result, not let one side very pleased, other side in despair. You know? That's no good. Now the result is people, no one very happy, but no one in despair. So it's a compromise. So that's a new stage. Now China is a country collectively running by a group of leaders and with term limit. China, the new leaders, they will facing quite a lot hard job.
In South Korea, you know, we like to say we have a military alliance with the most powerful military power in the world, which is the United States, also the largest economy. We keep forgetting that part. And we also, our most important trading partner is the most dynamic economy in the world, which is China. So when the two get along, we couldn't be in a better position, South Korea. But of course, the problem is when we think when the two don't get along as well, and there's tension in the U.S.-China relations, then we find ourselves in a very, very difficult position, between a rock and a hard place, as they say in the United States. So, and one of the things that of course, that we worry about is the so-called U.S. pivot. Now, we understand that it's not a policy that is to contain the rise of China, etc., as some would say. But at the same time, it is true that at least the initial part of it, at the beginning of it, the military component of it seemed to have been getting a lot of attention, and perhaps that's leading to a lot of misunderstanding of what exactly it is. So if you could enlighten us about at least what you think is the essence of the U.S. pivot. And then, of course, I'd like to ask Dr. Jin to respond to that from the Chinese perspective, how you read the U.S. pivot to Asia. So,
well, first let me say that your description of Korea and the fact that Korea wants a good relationship between the U.S. and China is widely shared in this region. Every country in the Asia-Pacific region wants the United States and China to get along. And U.S. policymakers are very aware of the fact that if we don't get our relationship with China right, we will not be a strong power in the Asia-Pacific region, and our alliances will suffer. So this is a critical element, I think, of U.S. policy. Now, you know, the origin of the U.S. rebalancing or pivot to Asia really was a discussion that took place after President Obama was first elected in 2008 and before he took office in 2009. And his advisors had discussions about what they wanted to accomplish when they took office. And they were very clear-eyed about the need to draw down U.S. forces and eventually withdraw from Iraq and Afghanistan. And of course, U.S. economic challenges were already quite clear. And it was understood by everyone that the economic opportunities were greatest in the Asia-Pacific region. And so this notion that we would shift our attention increasingly to Asia really was the basis of U.S. policy before President Obama was ever inaugurated. And what I'd like to underscore is that at that time, there was it was very serious thinking about the U.S. relationship with China and a desire to strengthen that relationship to address global challenges, to work together on combating climate change and proliferation and global economic rebalancing. And so having good relations between the U.S. and China and working together with China was a critical component of the rebalancing policy from the beginning. And recently, National Security Advisor Tom Donilon gave a speech, actually at CSIS, and he explained the pillars of the rebalancing policy. And one of those pillars is still today having a good, constructive, effective relationship between the U.S. and China. So I think it's really a misunderstanding that the U.S. pivot to Asia is somehow aimed at strategic encirclement of China or containing China. It's imperative that we have a good relationship between the U.S. and China. Where we have differences, we certainly need to manage them, we need to acknowledge them. Our interests do not converge on every issue. But I think there is a very clear understanding that the U.S. and China must get along. This is not a policy that is aimed at damaging Chinese interests.
I think the opinion in China is quite split at the moment. Some people, especially those median guys, they deeply believed the coming back. They still like use the first term of coming back. They refuse to use term like a pivot, a rebalancing. They deeply believed the coming back is main target at China, and the tension try to contain China, and the goal is try to have a strategic encirclement against China. Those people are very influential, especially among netizens, internet users. That's one side of the story. But on the other side, the mainstream of foreign policy makers, they don't accept that analysis. People take a more balanced and sophisticated attitude. People believe there are more, many reasons behind the coming back. One reason Bonnie mentioned, because the political, economic energy here, the most economically dynamic area in the world. So it's important for U.S. to stay here. And as for geopolitical reason, something relating with China, the rise of China, but also something relating with Japan. People tend to believe Hatoyama-san, several years ago, he raised the concept of the East Asia community, right? I think the States not like that idea. And we'll make sure never happen again. And then our neighborhood, China's neighborhood, invite the U.S. coming back. That's also a reason. And some personal reason, because President Obama really interested in this area, self-defined as a first Pacific president of United States. And then Madam Clinton is very important fact because she is politically very influential and with strong will, right? If the State Department are running by typical technocrats with no political base, no way to do that. Right? Most professional diplomats and army men, their knowledge is about not Pacific but Atlantic, So not easy to force those guys pay more attention to Pacific and invest more money in this area. but with the help of Madam Clinton, a strong woman, so he can do that. So that's personal reason. So many reasons, and the mainstream foreign policy makers still believe the U.S.-China relations is how to say, combined with competition and cooperation. Those basic structure remain the same. So we will have quite a lot difficulties ahead of us in the coming days. Perhaps we will have more disputes than current days. But the cooperation still, the possibility for cooperation was always there. So the mainstream in foreign policy making, their voice is not that loud, but I think they dominate the policy making process. So that's fortunate for U.S.-China relations.
Speaking about U.S.-China relations and cooperation, I think a few years back, if you remember, people were saying if there was one strategic area on which U.S. and China really agree upon, it's actually North Korea. You remember that a few years back, that everybody wants denuclearization. That's the ultimate goal. And in fact, the six-party talks was an incredible cooperative, job done between the United States and China. So, but when we look at the situation today, it's actually North Korea now has become actually a source of a great deal of tension and different strategic outlooks between the United States, China, South Korea, Japan, everybody, it seems to me. And so how do we deal with the North Korean issue? And especially what do you think is the role of how should the U.S. and China, let's first talk about the two, how should they cooperate on resolving the North Korean nuclear issue? And
well, I think that the United States and China have at certain junctures cooperated very well. It's very useful to go back and evaluate when and why we were able to cooperate very well. I would argue that in very early 2003, the United States and George W. Bush basically asked Beijing to take on a multilateral process, to lead a multilateral process, which started as the three-party talks and of course later became the six-party talks. And at that juncture, China urged the United States to please talk to North Korea because the crux of the problem was between the U.S. and North Korea. But I think that Beijing agreed, in part because it worried that inaction, refusal to cooperate at that point, could have had very negative consequences. The United States had adopted a preemptive war strategy. We were going into Iraq. Beijing worried that the United States might even conventionally strike North Korea. And so the way that we get China to cooperate more in North Korea, in my view, is you have to change China's calculus. China has to know what the risks and the benefits are. At the end of 2010, when there was the North Korean firing on Yongpyong-do, it was very clear that South Korea had reached its limit of tolerance with North Korea. And the United States also conveyed this to Beijing, that South Korea was going to hold some military exercises, and if North Korea escalated, we could have had a serious problem. And it could have escalated further to a military conflict. And I think that the Chinese understood the risks were higher. And I do believe that they put pressure on North Korea to not intervene. So the challenge going forward is to change China's risk-benefit analysis. This is very, very difficult because you can't do it in a contrived way. It really has to be real. And unless the United States makes this the top priority of our foreign policy, why should China make it a top priority? And so far in the Obama administration, it certainly hasn't been a top priority. But this is not an easy thing to do because ultimately, China doesn't want a nuclear North Korea, but it's not China's top priority on the Korean Peninsula. preserving stability remains of the utmost importance. And with the new leader, Kim Jong-un, in charge in North Korea, I think the Chinese have some hope that he will make some changes in North Korea. It will take time, but he will implement economic reform, and he will open up the country to the world. And I certainly hope that the Chinese are right, but I must admit that based on evidence I've seen so far, it looks like wishful thinking.
I mean, one of the great sources of frustration from South Korea vis-a-vis China, of course, is it what South Korea perceives to be Chinese unwillingness to pressure North Korea to stop making those provocations, even when we think China does have the influence and the means to do so. How would you respond to that?
You know, today's China facing this situation, the domestic factor play more and more important role on foreign policy. And among Chinese public, I think still there are quite a lot build very strong sympathy to North Korea. And for capability, you know, North Korea is very independent country. They hate to submit to any external pressure. Really difficult to deal with them. So then comes the problem. Within China, we have no consensus how to go forward. And to deal with that, we must be very cautious, right? Unless China determined to break up with them, then we own much more choices. But if we want to have a stable relationship with them, and they are very sensitive, then your choice is very limited. China do want to see a stable peninsula, and China do want to remain very good relationship with ROK. But there are some nature-born restraint on Chinese side to deal with your northern brother, DPRK.
I mean, I think it just seems that what you just mentioned, Professor Chin, is the fact that U.S., China, South Korea can cooperate, should cooperate to let's say, normalize North Korea, because it's in North Korea's interest. It's in all our interest if we can not only denuclearize North Korea, but actually have them follow the Chinese model of reform and opening. This region will become so much more prosperous. It will be so much more economically dynamic than it is even now. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Glazer and Professor Chin for a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to your continued contribution, your expertise in trying to improve the security situation in this part of the world. Thank you very much.
Right, just